Hey there everyone, Sage Popham here, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism. And have you ever been in a situation or a time of your life where you just feel like you can't settle down? Your mind's racing, you're nervous, you're stressed out, you can't sleep at night. Maybe the only way you can is to maybe have a couple drinks at the end of the day. Right? I think we've all been there at some point in our life where we just can't really seem to turn our minds off. We have a really hard time relaxing. We have a really hard time settling in because life gets crazy and chaotic sometimes, right? Well, this is where I think herbal medicine has some really unique and special gifts that we can't really get from a lot of conventional approaches to medicine. And so I wanted to take some time to talk about this specifically because, our modern world is rampant with stress and people are nervous and people are anxious, and especially these days with COVID and everyone's really worried and the world's changing and it's a little topsy-turvy and it can be very stressful. And I think during these times are really, really important to attend to the health of our nervous systems, attend to our how we navigate and manage our stress. And there's just so many very, very helpful herbal medicines for this that I really wanted to take the time to share this with the greater evolutionary herbalism community. So be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Hit the like button, leave a comment. It really helps boost the algorithm so more people can find our videos and our podcasts and things like that. And if you're not watching this on our blog, be sure to head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com where we got all sorts of free training and materials there for you for free. So without further ado, let's jump into this topic and help you to learn how to use herbs to navigate the stresses of the daily life and how to help you settle down a little bit. Question 2 from Amelia Kellner in Elemental Herbalism is asking, can you recommend a Nervine or set of Nervines that can help someone who cannot turn themselves off and relax at all? This person feels constantly wound up and small things set them off sometimes. Things that have been annoying them for years will happen again and send them into a rage. They feel imbibing alcohol is the only way they can relax, and I worry they may be relying on that too much on a daily basis. Bipolar disorder runs in their family, but has not been tested for this in this person yet, and they are nearing middle age. I'm happy to make a tincture, but something that could work in capsule form as well would be even better for this particular person. Yeah, great question, Amelia. Yeah, so this is a very classic sounding pattern of, at the very least, nervous system exhaustion and potentially endocrine exhaustion, HPA-axis or the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis of hormonal cascades being potentially exhausted, or as we say in kind of lay person terms, burned out, right? In this state, someone's tolerance for stress is simply very, very low. As you said, the slightest things can really set them off, make them very frustrated, agitated, kind of just lose their shit, basically, right? And their tolerance level for stress is very, very low. This is a very standard pattern, really, associated with, like I said, at the very least, nervous system burnout and potentially more severe endocrine burnout. So, there's a couple approaches to this. One, I feel like the main category of herbs that I use here are absolutely the Nervine trophorestoratives. So that's going to be remedies like Avena sativa or milky oat seed. That herb is really best used in tincture form for its trophorestorative effect. I suppose if you were getting a capsule of it, if it's definitely being harvested in the milky oats, in the milky stage of development, then you would be getting all those constituents from the latex. But I mention that just because decoctions or infusions of milky oats really, you get a lot of great minerals and nutritives out of it, but you don't really get that nerve tropho-restorative effect as well. Once again, pardon the background noise. There's some work being done on my place right now, so it's a little noisy in the background. Sorry about that. So, yeah. The alcohol thing definitely doesn't make things better because it tends to agitate the liver. So anger and frustration and irritability in Chinese medicine is a very classic liver pattern, right? That's kind of like the term the raging alcoholic, right? Is usually not helping for sure. So just on a side note there. So anyways, back to the tropho-restoratives. Skullcap, Scutellaria lateriflora is my second favorite tropho-restorative. Again, tincture form is preferable, though I would suppose a good quality capsule product would work as well. Again, that one, just the infusion of it is not as ideal as the tincture for the tropho-restorative effects. That being said, I actually find that the infusion of skullcap, personally, I find to be significantly more sedating and calming than the tincture. So just a little side note there. Hypericum perforatum or St. John's wort, really, really good nerve tonic. It's nice because it's a little more on the warming side. It will also support with liver detoxification. So if they've been drinking a lot, St. John's wort is a really great remedy to consider to help the liver to detoxify a little bit. St. John's wort works through the cytochrome P450 liver detoxification pathways and kind of levels that up pretty significantly. So that's actually why it is contraindicated when people are taking a lot of medications, because it affects the body's metabolism of those medications. So just be aware of that if they're taking prescription medication. The other nerve tropho-restoratives that I really love are ashwagandha, Withania somnifera. And this is a good one because it's a cool remedy because it treads that line between nerve tropho-restorative as well as being an adaptogen. So if this person does indeed have a deeper level of endocrine burnout or exhaustion, ashwagandha is a really great remedy here. It'll help to replenish and rebuild and restore a worn out endocrine system over time. It does take time. It is an Ayurvedic remedy, and the traditional term for this type of plant is rasayana, which means essentially a rejuvenative tonic. It's something that is rebuilding, restoring, and replenishing someone who is weak, deficient, exhausted all the time, and just basically burned out. So Withania is a really great remedy to consider there. And then the other one I would mention is lion's mane mushroom. That's the one I have. I don't use it as often, but it's one I've been using more lately, and I love it. It just feels like great nerve food, and it does pair well with all these other remedies that I'm mentioning. So yeah, so those are some nerve tropho-restoratives that I would consider to keep, and consider those remedies. Most of those are not necessarily like acutely calming and sedating, right? These are more herbs that are going to help rebuild, restore, and replenish a burned out person. The only exception there I would say is skullcap. Skullcap's going to be the most sedative of those, but again, I find that the infusion is much more sedating than the tincture. Anything in the Nervine category essentially is going to be beneficial here. I personally really love, for people that are very high strung and high stressed, the more bitter Nervines I think are great, because the bitterness helps to cool them down if they tend to run a little hotter, which this person, if they get angry and raging, I would say they probably have a little bit more of a heat pattern going. So cooling Nervines are going to be a better choice. And the cooling Nervines are usually the bitter ones. So my favorite one here actually is blue vervain, Verbena hustata, is a really nice, very bitter, very cold Nervine that is especially great, as you said, they kind of have a hard time unwinding or turning their nervous system off. I love blue vervain for that. It's very specific for, boy, they are really pounding away down there. Um, it's very specific for the like type A personalities that just can't stop, right? They just can't stop. They don't know how to slow down. They have a hard time transitioning from work to home. Like they kind of bring their work home with them. I always joke around and say it's like it's the perfect plant for high stress entrepreneurs, because most entrepreneurs have a really hard time separating work from home, especially if they work from home. So blue vervain's really excellent in that way. And I love blue vervain for settling that nervous edge. The blue vervain person's very edgy all the time. Kava kava is nice here too, especially I like kava for people that maybe do rely on, either alcohol or cannabis, mainly those two to kind of settle, just because kava in, moderate doses does kind of sedate you to a noticeable place, right? It gets you to, it's not just like, oh, I'm not as anxious anymore. But kava can be kind of like, well, I feel a little, not just calmer, but like I feel a little looser, for people that like that, they basically kind of like that alteration of consciousness that something like alcohol or cannabis can bring. I find kava to be a really nice remedy there because it can do that. Obviously, it's like way milder. So kava's great. You do have to be a little careful with it in larger amounts for longer periods of time. Some people can sometimes get what they call kind of like a kava-induced dermatitis or a rash, which is a liver sign, just because it can, maybe be a little hard on the liver. So if this person's been drinking a lot, yeah, maybe it's not the most ideal, but it's a remedy worth considering, is why I'm mentioning it. So yeah, there's kava. I also really like the pedicula. I mean, there's so many remedies, but basically the cooling ones in the Nervine category are great. I suppose the other two I would mention here would be humulus lupulus or hops is really nice, very bitter, very cooling, good in that way. It's stronger as well. And then passion flower is very nice. It's neutral to cool in temperature, but also can be quite strong and effective for people. I would definitely avoid valerian if they're too hot. So that's one key thing to keep in mind. And all of these remedies should be perfectly fine in capsule form. I would just try to find an encapsulated product that is good quality. There's a lot of encapsulated herbal products out there that are not good quality. Those herbs have been powdered who knows how long ago. They might be well oxidized and on their way to just not being effective and good quality. So I think just make sure you're getting a quality encapsulated product, not, basically from a good herb company, right? I wouldn't do the like very generic supplement brands that just kind of do everything, like they also make like a vitamin C or whatever, like I'm not going to name names because I don't want to do that, but you know what I mean? There's just kind of those very generic supplement brands that do everything, and they've got their powdered herbs and they're just not really that great. So, and if you do encapsulated herbs and they're powdered, one recommendation I always have for people is to take a couple capsules and open them up and sprinkle it into the bottle and shake it up, so all the capsules will get a light dusting of the herb on the surface. That way when people take the capsule, they'll get a little bit of the taste of the herb. I do feel like that's very important. I don't like that little gelatin capsule getting in the way of tasting the herb. So if they are taking capsules, that's one way you can kind of get around that and get at least a little bit of the taste of the herb in that person. And then of course there's lifestyle changes that have to happen here, right? There's internal work that needs to be done, right? People in this state absolutely need to, first off, make sure they're getting an adequate amount of rest and sleep. They got to make sure they're drinking enough water. They got to make sure they're, eating a good diet, getting proper nutrition. Avoiding intolerant foods is very important. It's very common that when people do a strict elimination of foods that they're possibly intolerant to. Most notably here would be gluten and dairy. One of the first symptoms that people get when they ingest those foods after eliminating it for 8 weeks or so is irritability, actually. People cut gluten out of their diet for 2 months. They eat some bread for a few days. And oftentimes one of the first signs and symptoms is like a mood or energy symptom. They get really tired, they get really irritable, or they get kind of depressed, or they get kind of anxious. Oftentimes there'll be a digestive symptom there too. They get bloated, maybe they get a headache or their joint pain flares up. But the most common and usually the quickest one is something along the lines of a mood or energy kind of thing. So if they are intolerant to something that they're eating, I do think that's an important factor to consider, along with general stress management and just doing some internal work. Like, why are they such a hairline trigger? Why are they so agitated all the time? Like, when did that start? Like, why did that start? Like, I think there's some, it's important for people to do some inner reflection on these things, because things like this don't just develop overnight. There is room for self-improvement here that I do feel like is important. Sure, we can use herbs that will be very supportive and helpful, but if the people don't change the lifestyle and the habits and the activities that got them to this place, the herbs really are only kind of a bit of a band-aid. The behavior needs to change, and that doesn't happen overnight. And that doesn't happen without self-reflection, right? And doing that internal work. So yeah, great question there, Amelia. And hopefully that helps you navigate this client more effectively.